Colonel Potter, sir, my last wish is to be buried in my mother's wedding gown.
I've seen these Dodgers for 40 years, all the tricks. Dismissed!
He signed a lucrative network deal, walked away from the most beloved character on television, and within 5 years he was calling it the biggest mistake of his career. That's the paradox sitting at the center of MASH's story, a show so emotionally magnetic that leaving it destroyed almost every actor who tried. MASH wasn't supposed to become a cultural landmark. It began as a 1968 novel by Drive H. Richard Hornberger, writing under the pen name Richard Hooker, drawn from his own experience as a surgeon during the Korean War. 2 years later, director Robert Altman turned that novel into a sharp satirical film starring Donald Sutherland and Elliot Gould, released right as the Vietnam War was tearing the country apart emotionally. The film won the Palme d'Or at Cannes and an Academy Award for its screenplay, and it proved that audiences were ready for war stories that mixed absurd comedy with real grief. CBS took notice, and in 1972, writers Larry Gelbart and Gene Reynolds adapted it into a television series that would run for 11 seasons, far outliving the actual Korean War it depicted. What made the show dangerous, in the best sense, was its refusal to sit still. It started as a loose ensemble comedy and slowly transformed into something closer to a character study of trauma dressed in olive drab. That transformation is exactly what pushed several of its most beloved actors out the door. Not scandal, not firing, but the simple, painful reality that growth for one character often meant shrinkage for another. The first true departure hit audiences like a gut punch, and it began with an actor named McLean Stevenson. As Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake, Stevenson played the frazzled, warm-hearted commanding officer who anchored the 4077th's chaos with a kind of bumbling decency. He won a Golden Globe for the role and was, for a while, one of the most recognizable faces on network television. But behind that easy charm was a growing frustration. As Alan Alda's Hawkeye Pierce increasingly became the emotional and narrative center of the series, helped along by Alda's own growing role as writer and director, Stevenson felt his character stagnating. He told People magazine in 1975 that he wanted to be the one carrying a show, not playing support to someone else's spotlight. So at the end of season 3, he told producers he wasn't coming back. What happened next changed the language of American television. Rather than quietly transferring Henry Blake stateside, Gelbart and Reynolds decided to use his exit to remind viewers exactly what kind of story they were telling. In the season 3 finale, Abyssinia Henry, the character gets his discharge, and the episode plays out as a warm, joyful goodbye, hugs, tears, celebration. Then in the final scene, Radar walks into the operating room and delivers the news in a flat, stunned voice. Blake's plane went down over the Sea of Japan, no survivors. There's no laugh track, no swelling music, just silence and the beep of surgical equipment. It was one of the first times American television killed off a beloved sitcom character without warning, and CBS was flooded with letters, some grateful for the honesty, others furious. Larry Gelbart later defended the choice bluntly. In war, not everybody gets to go home. For Stevenson, the fallout was rougher than he anticipated. He signed with NBC hoping for stardom, but the McLean Stevenson show was canceled after a single season, and his next attempt, Hello Larry, became something of a punchline in television history. In a 1983 interview with the Los Angeles Times, he admitted he had taken himself out of the game, a quiet acknowledgement that MASH had been lightning in a bottle he'd never find again. When he died in 1996 at age 68, Alan Alda remembered him as a wonderful actor and a good man, proof that even as his post-MASH career struggled, the affection from his former castmates never faded. If Stevenson's exit was a public, tearful spectacle, Wayne Rogers's departure was the opposite, quiet, murky, and legally strange. Rogers played trapper John McIntyre, one half of the show's original comedic duo alongside Hawkeye. Their chemistry defined the earliest seasons, all rapid-fire banter and shared mischief. But Rogers had signed on believing MASH would function as a true ensemble, with screen time distributed evenly among its core cast. As Hawkeye's character absorbed more of the show's moral and emotional weight, Trapper's role shrank into something Rogers later described as simply nodding along to whatever Hawkeye said. He insisted it wasn't about ego but about the integrity of the storytelling. A character with nothing left to do doesn't deserve to keep occupying screen time. So after season 3, Rogers quietly declined to renew, and it turned out his original agreement with the studio had never been formally signed. It was built entirely on a handshake. When producers considered legal action, they discovered they had no real leverage, because he had never technically broken a contract at all. His exit left almost no room for closure. There was no farewell episode, no hospital send-off, Just a line in the Season 4 premiere explaining Trapper had been discharged while Hawkeye was on leave. Audiences were furious. First Henry Blake, now Trapper John, with no goodbye at all. Mike Farrell stepped in as B.J. Honeycutt, a steadier, more emotionally grounded replacement, and the show's tone shifted from buddy comedy toward something more introspective. Rogers, for his part, walked away from acting almost entirely in later decades, building a genuinely successful career as a financial investor and eventually a regular commentator on Fox News's business programming. He'd studied history at Princeton long before Korea ever became a set, and it showed. When he passed away in 2015 at 82, Alan Alda called him smart, funny, curious, and dedicated, adding that the two of them had promised to give each other grief for the rest of their lives, and that he was sorry they wouldn't get the chance. Then there was Gary Burghoff, whose departure carried none of the contractual drama but far more personal cost. As Radar O'Reilly, the wide-eyed company clerk who could hear helicopters before anyone else, Burghoff brought a fragile innocence to the show that softened its harshest moments. He was the only actor to reprise his role from the original film, and on television he deepened Radar into something the movie version never was, a symbol of boyhood swallowed whole by war. But by the show's later seasons, the grueling production schedule, combined with Burghoff's own struggles with anxiety and depression, began wearing him down. He was also increasingly absent from his young daughter's life, something he later called a mistake he never stopped regretting. His co-star Mike Farrell recalled in a 2018 interview that Burghoff often felt he wasn't receiving the appreciation he deserved, even though the rest of the cast respected him deeply. Contract disputes over pay and reduced screen time followed, and producers tried to accommodate him with lighter schedules, but by Season 8, he was emotionally finished. Unlike Rogers, Burghoff was given a proper send-off, the two-part episode Goodbye Radar, ending with him walking away in silhouette against the Korean sky, his teddy bear left behind on Hawkeye's bunk. After MASH, he largely withdrew from Hollywood, turning to painting, wildlife conservation, and inventing. He even held a patent for a fishing tackle design. He later summarized his exit in 2 words: family and burnout. Larry Linville's departure told a different kind of story altogether. As the pompous, self-important Major Frank Burns, Linville gave the show its comic villain, a man audiences loved to despise for his rigid rule-following and doomed affair with Major Margaret Houlihan. But Frank Burns was written as a static character in a show that was rapidly maturing around him, and by Season 5, Linville felt he had exhausted what the role could offer. He wasn't fired and wasn't pushed out. He simply chose not to renew, believing he'd taken Frank as far as the character could go. His exit allowed the show to abandon cartoonish villainy altogether in favor of more layered moral conflict, paving the way for David Ogden Stiers' Charles Emerson Winchester III, a cultured, arrogant, quietly wounded aristocrat who challenged the show's heroes in far subtler ways. Stiers stayed until the series finale in 1983, later coming out publicly as gay in 2009, explaining that he'd stayed private for years out of fear it would cost him work, particularly during his time voicing beloved Disney characters. He passed away in 2018. And through all of this upheaval, one actor never left at all. Loretta Swit played Major Margaret Hot Lips Houlihan for all 11 seasons, transforming a character introduced as a punchline into one of television's most quietly revolutionary portrayals of a woman in uniform. She was one of only 4 cast members to appear in both the pilot and the finale, proof that not every powerful story on MASH was about who walked away. What all of these exits reveal together is that MASH was never just a workplace comedy set in a war zone. It was a living, breathing thing that demanded something real from the people inside it, and for some, that cost was simply too high to keep paying. Stevenson chased a spotlight that never shone as bright again. Rogers found peace far from any soundstage. Burghoff chose his family over the fame. Linville knew when a character had nothing left to give. Each of them left a piece of themselves behind in that fictional Korean valley, and in return, the show gave them something few actors ever get, a role that outlived their absence, remembered not for how it ended, but for how deeply it was felt.